as a break for a second because I did all that rant I did earlier. Oh,
Yep.
he's trying.
Okay.
Um,
Hey, anyways, guys out there in the wide world of the interwebs, this is Dave March, the Tory War Writer on the Spy Guy, and this is my new co-host, Paul O'Brien, and we're hoping our guest, who said he might show up, will be able to show up, but it's been a little weird, and he was just, Paul was just explaining to me about his recent experience with trying to buy some shoes.
yeah, Brooks are fantastic shoes, and they're fantastic, specifically the glycerin line. They're fantastic because they're never on sale, and you can't even buy the previous models because they're on edition 20 now. You can't even find them on Amazon at the moment because they sell out so often. So they have no incentive to ever put these shoes on sales. And sure enough, after I bought mine, a day after they came in the mail, they went on a 25% off sale. As is life.
Yeah, no, it kind of reminds me often when I'm driving home on the highway, I'm like, okay, well, the main roads are out, so I'll take the side road. And then as soon as you're driving along the side road, stuck in traffic on the side road, the highway's clearing up. And I'm like, oh,
Exactly. And it always works like that. So no, fortunately, we were able to get what we needed. Owen just texted me saying that he's good. He's checking his missed emails. I don't know if he has the link for this current stream, so you might.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely send that to him then.
Right.
Just take a second here. Sorry for all the dead air, but
oh yeah,
things take time.
Oh yeah.
But for me, for the traffic this week was especially bad because what's been is in Canada we have the Grey Cup, which is kind of our version of the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the biggest sports events. But like the Super Bowl, it's not played in the team who's winning. It's played it's a year in advance. So this weekend the Grey Cup is happening. I happened to be at my club last night for a random dinner with a couple of would-be candidates and past candidates.
How'd that go? I meant to ask that.
Yeah, it went okay. Like the guy's current police officer, and she's working in government in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, at the end, I'm like, wait, I just had to pick up the check here, and you guys are offering free with my money. But on the other hand, he did clear up a homeless encampment for me, so I can't be too complaining.
Mm-hmm. Hey, no, that's always a plus. Okay, there's something you just said there that I've had a question on. You said Toronto. You didn't pronounce the T. I thought most people don't pronounce the T, but when I see media or at least personalities, they pronounce the T in Toronto. Do some people say Toronto or do some people say Toronto? Like, is there a difference in Canada?
Yeah, I think hey, Owen, welcome to the show.
Owen, welcome to the show.
Guys, sorry for being late. I'm going on vacation. Like all day, I've just been talking with Jacqueline here about vacation. I completely forgot.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you're asking me, I think it's a local accent situation, especially since though I am from Hamilton, I grew up in the Ottawa Valley a lot when my parents split, so I only spent my summers here, and I think that's definitely might be a bit of the Ottawa accent. It has a very more twang to it. We had a former Conservative leader for our party, and he's also from there, though he now lives in Saskatchewan, Andrew Scheer, and you wouldn't hear the accent, especially when he spoke French. Then his Ottawa Valley accent came out, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
All right. Okay. I was always curious because the movie Argo with Ben Affleck, he's posing a CIA agent, and when he's training the American hostages how to pass as Canadian citizens, when they say they're from Toronto, he corrects them saying, no, don't. You're from this city in Toronto, so you don't pronounce the T, you say Toronto.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I've always kept that in mind. But Owen, thank you for coming.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I'm glad to be here. I love it.
Yeah. So go ahead, Paul.
No. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of our backgrounds. For the audience, I'm Paul O'Brien. I'm from Houston, Texas. And I'm 29 years old. So we're all up and coming in the world, young professionals. And wanted to introduce myself to the audience. Owen, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. My name's Owen Jones. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm living in Oklahoma now. 28. I'm a journeyman plumber, gas fitter.
Well, those who've seen me on the show before, I guess I haven't really gone to the background unless you go back to the first episode I did with one of my old co-hosts. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and now I'm about to turn 46, which is like, can't believe I'm halfway through my life. How did it all go wrong? How did it go all right?
From our perspective, your big brother age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a slight off topic there. Owen, I just finished reading the Spacer series.
Yeah. Was I right about anything? Are you going to... Oh, wait.
Do you want to know?
No, don't tell me. Eventually I'll get back around to it. It just got so stressful, man. I was like, there's like no break here. I'm used to where like they'll go to war in this story, right? If it's a long series, then like they have the breaks where like the sides build up, and it's like, oh man, this next thing's gonna be even bigger because they've been. But no, it was just constant. I was like, I can't take this. I was like, this fiction is stressing me out.
Right. No, I can say safely that 10th book, the answers to all the questions, I'm like, what? That's what you chose to do? So we're all right, we're all wrong is the thing, and then I'll let you catch up and read it.
So with our format that we're going with this show, first thing and our favorite question that we're going to be asking is, how did you know you were conservative?
Like, when did you realize you weren't like all the other children in the playground?
When did you look in a mirror and see a racist?
I grew up. Imagine this. My mom was like big in the Tea Party. She listened to Rush. She was a big Rush Limbaugh fan back in the 80s when he just started, and she was in college. You know what I mean? So she talks about that. She talked about the first election she ever voted. She voted for Reagan. Oof. And so and she's very proud of that. And she's like, I voted for Reagan. So I grew up with, from in my early political memory is where I had a conception of real politics, kind of, was the 2008 financial crash. I mean, I have memories of standing in line with my mom. She would make us when she would go to vote, right? She would make us stand in line with her and like, this is important. You need to understand this. But I kind of rebelled in high school, and I just viewed all of them as totally corrupt. Because I was watching as basically she would be like, all these people are like that they would vote in. Because if you remember back down in Florida, you had Rubio and these other guys, and then it would come out. It's like, well, they don't have the courage of their convictions, right? And so I'd watch as that Tea Party movement was betrayed. And I'm getting these lectures in the car while we're listening to conservative talk radio, my brother and I in the back seat, getting driven to and from school, which is an hour-long drive for us going to private school. And she was talking about how she's like, the Democrats steal elections in these cities. I'm telling you, they're stealing them in Philadelphia. They're stealing them in these different cities. So I'm growing up with this in my background. But I viewed it as totally controlled and corrupt, right? That it was completely no true people's, a tribune of the plebs would ever get into office. There was too much money and power. I mean, as a teenager, I was completely cynical, totally disillusioned. I spent a lot of my time listening to Nirvana's 1994 MTV Unplugged when I was doing my homework. Great album. But to get a picture of my attitude on this, So then I go off to college and kind of got semi-indoctrinated to be like, I guess maybe there's aspects of leftism that yada yada, because I could recognize that there were problems in the country, right? But it seemed to me that it didn't matter, that both sides were totally corrupt. And then Donald Trump won the election in 2016. So I mean, I was a supporter of Donald Trump. I don't know if this is when he won, it was very clear to me he was not supposed to win.
Well, that's something that's interesting to kind of take it a little bit back. Your perspective, I think, is kind of rare, specifically where you grew up in Maryland, because if you look at all the recent electoral dedications of the state, it always goes Democrat. Yet there, from my understanding, there is actually quite a conservative concentration in Maryland. And I'd more bring this up to kind of give some context to the audience, specifically the Canadian ones who don't know the geography of and the demographics of Maryland. Maybe you could speak to where's the conservative side, where, like, how would you describe Maryland to a foreigner? Because we do probably have people who are, if not foreign to the United States, foreign to Maryland, like myself. And actually, I'd like to pull up a map of Maryland.
I was going to ask if you could do that.
Yeah, I'd like to pull up a map of Maryland just to help out with the geography. Maybe you could help kind of guide us.
So there's a present button in the center there?
Yeah, I was rationalizing that.
So usually you'll get like a screen that you can choose to show on.
Right. And I'm gonna, do I want to present this one? I think I don't like that one. I'm gonna go ahead and pick this one over here. Didn't
really spend a lot of time in Maryland. I was driving down to DC for a vacation one time, but having spent a few days driving to and from Boston and across New York State, I have a general idea of what it can be like. And
it's gorgeous. The geography on the East Coast, as odious as I find the politics and some of the population, it's absolutely beautiful.
To interrupt, can you guys?
Aha!
There we go.
Apparently, I had the stage button.
So you can. I don't know if you're able to. If you can guide me, Owen, with my cursor, if you're able to see. Kind of help the audience understand the geography of Maryland, because I know there are some deep blue parts of Maryland. And I know there's some deep red parts of Maryland, and maybe you could help us with the geography and sort of where you fit in and where it makes sense for people like you and your mom, where they fit in a state like this.
When I was around 22, we moved. If you look up at Harford County, at the top there,
yep,
Pennsylvania, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from that county over to the east and all along this, that's called Maryland's first district.
Okay.
That is where the single Republican representative for the House of Representatives comes from.
Okay.
Now, he's actually he came in back in 2010. And he came out of the Tea Party, and he was one of the 6 who was objecting with Matt Gaetz to McCarthy getting the speakership back in January.
Mm-hmm.
I was very proud that I was one of the very few people whose politics was at that moment actually being represented. Now, that whole area, Harford County doesn't count technically for this, but generally speaking, that whole area is called the Eastern Shore. There have even been Eastern Shore separatist movements. They either want to become their own state or somehow join another state.
Yeah, I was about to say, looking at your neighbors, it doesn't look like you have anywhere to run. It's not an Idaho situation with Washington.
They're right next to Delaware, which I got a ticket in Delaware once, and it's on my. Can I curse?
Yeah. It's not monetized. You can, and it's not the first 5 seconds, so go right ahead.
All right. It's on my shit list. This is so ever since I got that ticket, my brake line burst, and then this lady cop gives me a ticket, and she was so snide and smug about it. I'm not going to get into it. I ended up spending more money in gas driving to Delaware to fight it in court, and then for the judge to just throw it out and just be like, no, you got to pay this ticket. Wow. Anyways,
so my understanding of the geography of the area is this corner, the first district. What's directly adjacent to you is the farmland in Delaware. Is that a correct understanding? Yeah, because I knew somebody who lived in Delaware, and they said the north side of Delaware is actually quite conservative, but then the south is more liberal.
Yeah, I mean, there's some nice Oktoberfest, fall harvest festivals and stuff they throw up there too. It's really the problem with Delaware. I mean, it's not my state. But the problem with Delaware is that it's a corporate state. It's a state that gets all its money from the fact that they have those corporate laws so they incorporate out of Delaware. The same with which Dakota is it? I can't remember. The same like that. So it's that, and it's utterly corrupt. Now, So that's the Eastern Shore.
Right.
And the Eastern Shore is also, there's a lot.
Before you go, if you did join up with Delaware, maybe you would turn it from a blue state to a red state.
It would never happen. I mean, the Eastern Shore is really, they hate it because the state is jerried to hell.
Yeah.
It has been since the 80s. They started jerrying hard in the 80s, and they got, I wasn't alive at the time, but my mom talks about it and how sickened she was. There was a conservative Republican who had a district. They redistricted her so that she didn't have any of her own constituents, and she had to run another election. So it's just, that's what they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're trying the same thing in Houston, and it's just, there's this triangle of just mad corruption between DC, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. Then they're all, I mean, Baltimore and Philadelphia are just in a neck and neck race to see who could be the most corrupt city in America.
I have stories about that we can get to later. I've witnessed. I worked in the city. The job I had was for a commercial contractor in construction. It was a general and mechanical. They had two halves to the business, but often what they would do is, if they were the general, they were also the mechanical. And there was a lot of money going to do these contracts, these big contracts in the cities for the schools. But we weren't, generally speaking, we weren't really ever building a new school. We were taking an old school from the 50s or the 60s, or that had been built in the 50s and added onto in the 60s. And we were adding AC, heating and cooling. In bigger projects, we were like doing like rooftop units for that purpose. And what happened was, it was political. I realized it was political on one of the schools in particular, where we were putting these units, and I was talking to the guys. I'm like, we were putting in, it was like the size of, imagine a big fridge, not big like huge, but it's a sizable fridge. And that's what we were putting in, and we were putting in each classroom in these terrible schools where it's like, they need to just tear these schools down. The reason we were doing it is because the politicians can say, oh, we installed and gave AC and heating for this many children and this many classrooms and this many schools, right? Because it was the cheapest and fastest possible option to put these units in. But it wasn't the right thing to do. And right. I was like talking to me, I was like, why are we putting these in? And that was my realization. And then that, you have to put in, it was also very important that we put up a sign that said, project by, Governor Hogan. Or by Governor Larry Hogan. So that we had that out there. So I witnessed that. And so working in the city, I witnessed a lot. I have a lot of stories. But Baltimore is utterly corrupt. I mean, the last, I don't know how many mayors have been ejected for corruption, just outright just taking money. And then, some of them, they have the gall to, after another one gets kicked out for the Senate, they then run again. And the people of Baltimore are so politically stupid or numb, they don't care, such that they might actually vote them in. But anyway, so we're going through the geography, I guess. You want to stick doing that. I'll finish the Eastern Shore here. Hartford is a beautiful county. That's where we were living. It's where my church is, all my friends back home. Shout out Church of Reconciliation,
right?
Charismatic Episcopal Church. So it's got the township of Bel Air, which is gorgeous, great bars. Can you tell I was raised Catholic if I mentioned bars and churches in the same breath?
A little bit.
So the rest of the and it's agrarian in Hartford as well. That's the thing that makes Hartford and the rest of the Eastern Shore, that ties it together, is there's a huge agrarian element in this area. There's a lot of farmland. This is also, in Maryland is huge horse country. You got to remember, we have a big racetrack that so there's this huge rural element. People and they hunt and everything else. I mean, there's even you see this island here in between Anne Arundel and Queen Anne's. That's Kent Island. I had a friend that I worked with from there. He was so passionate about his locality. He was so parochial. He got it tattooed, the shape of the island. He got it tattooed on his arm.
Wow.
So yeah, the Eastern Shore has a very specific attitude. They don't, generally speaking, they really don't like. Though here's the other thing: if they don't have a farm or something, they're working on the other side. So they're driving across. My experience with Eastern Shore people is they're driving like sometimes 2 hours to do work, but they just like, oh, they just hate it over there.
Right.
That's the Eastern Shore. They also have Ocean City, which is just a summer vacation town that has gotten really violent on the boardwalk in the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, and it's always, I appreciate you going through the some of the geography, because Maryland is in like the top 3 states that if I don't think about USA geography, I will forget. Top 3 states are Delaware, Maryland, Wyoming. If I don't talk about the states enough, I will forget all 3 of those states even existing. Just so I appreciate you going in, because because I know I don't remember it that well. I appreciate you kind of giving the insights of Maryland.
I want to say this as well about Maryland. Maryland has a distinct culture. It's like you're a fish. You can't recognize the water. It took Jacqueline, in leaving Maryland there is a very distinct Maryland culture, and the parts of that culture that are not corrupted by the people that I hate, that I find odious, I love. The food is to die for. The crab, Old Bay. Dude, the rest of the world is welcome. You're welcome. Old Bay is great. Old Bay chips. Crabs. It's just so the seafood is fantastic up there. I miss seafood. I used to have it weekly. I would eat seafood. Haven't had it in months.
You got these McBot
and the flag is great.
Yeah,
river fish.
You're in beef. You're in beef county now.
I am in beef.
You're in beef country.
The home of the chicken fried steak or whatever.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's sort of the running joke with going from Maryland to Oklahoma. Why are you going to Oklahoma? Oh, I wanted to move to a city where I could feel skinny.
Oh, dude. Okay. This is a sidetrack. I'm on the 7th day of a fast right now. I'm preparing for Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, you gotta make room.
I'd also gorged myself on candy, and I'd eaten like a pig in October, and I'm like, my jeans are tight. I'm going to Arizona for where my in-laws are, and I'm going to be in all these pictures, and I have pictures from my parents and Thanksgivings and things people got together. I'm like, I'm not going to be the puffy fat guy in these pictures.
Right.
I haven't eaten a thing. I'm drinking black coffee like a trucker or something.
Right. Well, I had a question with regards to sort of the local geography, because I know like the Northeast has its own sort of club among itself, at least being a Southerner. Like we know we will call y'all the Northeast. But y'all
too.
Huh?
It's true, but I take offense to, I just like, because Maryland, the Mason-Dixon line runs through Maryland.
Right.
Right.
If DC were north of Maryland, Maryland would have probably joined the Confederacy.
Well, yeah, no, that's one of the ironies that most people don't know about the Emancipation Proclamation, was that they think it freed all the slaves. It actually just freed the slaves in the South, and Maryland kept the slaves, which,
yeah,
that's one of those big actuallys.
There were quite a few stars and bars that I used to see in my youth in the state until that became too radical a few years ago.
Well,
dude, I remember going to upstate New York about 10 years ago, and just driving through, like, me and my friend we were at this hotel, and it had this weird roundabout. And if you missed the roundabout exit to the hotel, you had to go back around. And we missed it like 4 or 5 times. And it was just nothing but stars and bars along this strip. And my friend's just going to me, like, Dave, I hear banjos. We're doomed.
That's too funny. Well, my intent with that line of questioning was to ask you, we have a tendency to, as conservatives in these sorts of areas, to, huddle up, find our own. What would you say the difference between, or maybe the differences and the commonalities between the conservatives in like Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Jersey, and maybe New York a bit? I don't know if that's too far from y'all, but, do you find any sort of kinship with the conservatives in like the neighboring states? Or do you recall that?
My brother is actually going to college right now in Hofstra on a lacrosse scholarship. And his girlfriend is a New York native, a New York Italian, and they're Republicans and a Trump family. They love Trump. And so I do have that connection. I generally speaking, I find that I have a kinship with people. There's the type of Republican that is probably more associated with the Rhino wing of the party, right? That would, if I came up to them and I would try to commiserate about having to live under a blue state, they might feel slightly uncomfortable doing so, right? They might, they're not really full bore on people should be allowed to carry guns around whenever they want and, yada, yada. There is, however, the other part of people. So the type of Republican that has had to live under the boot heel of the left, the blue boot heel in these states, that shares my attitude about it, I find a great camaraderie with. And we get to complain and talk about just how terrible they are, just how stupid they are. And be like, we talk, you talk about, generally you've experienced some injustice or something, it's like, because these areas, if they're not rural, these cities are dangerous. I was working a block away from where a cop got killed by a 12 o'clock boy, if you know what that is.
I actually don't.
No.
12 o'clock boys are, I don't know if a gang is the right term. It's a culture that developed in Baltimore. If you're from around Baltimore, you generally call it Baltimore. Sometimes I call it Baltimore. But
okay. It's hard to know that because Tracy Turnbland off Hairspray definitely said Baltimore.
Yeah. But 12 o'clock boys are a subculture that is developed of young black men, generally. And I mean young, like grade school even sometimes. And they get dirt bikes, which are illegal in the city. You're not allowed to drive them around. But many years ago, the police chased a suspect on a dirt bike. And guess what? He, in running away from them, got in an accident and got killed. So obviously that's the police's fault for trying to enforce a law on the books. And they banned police from doing that. Police aren't allowed. So if you want to run from the police, what you should do is hop on a dirt bike, because then they're not allowed to chase you.
Right. That's
so
things to know when next time you're in Baltimore, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Get yourself a dirt bike, first thing.
The 12 o'clock boys are called that because they can take their dirt bikes and make it go straight up like 12 o'clock.
Ah, okay.
So that's why they call them that. Which is a classic type of gang name. When you look at the old London gang names, they're always like that. Like once you hear the explanation, like that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes no sense.
And they'll just sometimes. I was at a stoplight. Again, driving to a job in the city. I was at a stoplight when they I don't know what the hell. I don't know what it was. They're driving. They just basically ignore all traffic lights. As if there's some kind of funeral procession or something, except going really fast and obnoxiously and, flipping everybody off. Just drove through the city running red lights and everything else. It was kind of funny. I remember I looked over and I saw this guy, and he looked like the lawyer from The Wire, the bald one that was in it. And I remember I looked over at him and he was like, I just remember his face. I thought it was really funny how scared he was. I was like, "That's right, bro. You probably voted for this." Yeah.
That's yeah.
What were we talking about?
No, well, we were talking about was somewhat of the camaraderie that you find among neighboring states, and
the people.
There's maybe a conservative camaraderie, but I'm kind of curious, sort of for people who aren't familiar with the Northeast like myself, how can you tell the difference between somebody from Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Jersey, like in the rural areas? Like what's sort of a tell?
Honestly, rural Pennsylvania, like Hartford, I honestly think if I had my druthers, I would move the Eastern Shore into Pennsylvania.
Yeah, because if you go into this, like, if I recall, like, this area right that I'm circling here is all relatively conservative, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Southern Jersey tends to be a bit more conservative, whereas Northern tends to be more liberal.
Yeah, I mean, down in the south of Delaware, you got like Rehoboth Beach and stuff, and that's just where, I mean, I think Biden has his house down there and everything. And I actually have a brother who's now he's doing real estate down there. But I don't know, because I don't know, there's a lot of movement going on, people moving out and other people moving in. So there might be lefties coming in, moving up into the north. But all of this, so like Garrett, Allegheny, Washington, they voted to leave Maryland. Like, I think the last election, they passed it. They want to join West Virginia. And West Virginia, I'm probably totally open to it, because West Virginia is also open a few years back. And by a few, I mean, like,
now refresh my memory on the geography. This border is defined by the river or a mountain range.
I actually don't know. And I've worked in those counties, and I'm not sure. Those counties are also incredibly rural and agrarian, and they've been gerried so that they don't provide a representative. So they're basically not represented.
Right. Which, to me, that makes all the sense in the world to join West Virginia, given that you just ignore the fact that that river was your border for, centuries.
Yeah. I mean, West Virginia was a secession of Virginia itself. Virginia used to be way bigger. It's part of why they had so much power in the early republic. The first 5? No, not John Adams. Other than John Adams, like the first 5 presidents it was Virginian, John Adams, and then Virginians. Because it was enormous. So in the Civil War, what happened was West Virginia stayed with the Union, and that's why it separated.
Right.
It's also poorer than Virginia because it has more mountains.
Right.
I've always maintained that since I really studied the American Revolution, that if the British had given all the colonies members of Parliament and just made sure Virginia had more, the revolution probably would never happen, because Virginia would have been like, "Why we don't want to give up our superior position in Parliament to you guys."
Yeah, it would have. I actually completely agree with that. I'm so happy the British were so arrogant.
Yeah, they were just so dumb.
Like, yeah.
So, kind of, I think I'm going to go ahead and pull this on. I think it was a good introduction to Maryland for most people who don't think about Maryland. A question I had was sort of the culture shock moving from Maryland to Oklahoma City. Very different places, very different cultures. You go from a coastal city to a landlocked, flat, plain state.
So flat.
It's so flat. You can see all your neighboring states from a 4-story building.
It is. I like the people. I have good experience with people. I mean, I'm a blue collar guy, and generally speaking, I get along better with that crowd. The professional class people, the managerial class especially, I really sometimes like. I've been church shopping. I finally found one that I kind of like right now. And I was like, some of the ones with these people that I think they're probably Republicans, but they're like rhino Republicans. And I'm like, you're not my people. I can't like break bread with you. I would be the oaf amongst them. I would be the guy saying the thing. Oh, you're not supposed to say that. It's like, well, it's true. I'm going to say it.
Yeah, they're Republicans who love power.
Yeah, it's also, there's something about it. I don't know. I haven't quite put my finger on it.
What you're describing is something we see in Dallas and city Republicans here in Texas. I mean, it is a rhino type that, and I shouldn't say loves power. I should say Republican statist.
Yeah.
That's how I usually define a rhino in Texas. They're Republican, but it's not a what you're doing is wrong liberals. It's you're doing it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I often find a dividing line. I was thinking about this today about, the neocon Ben Shapiro and these wings. I was like, I'm trying. People are all surprised. It's like, oh, Ben Shapiro's a neocon. I mean, that's not what they're saying, but they're being surprised by his positions, right? It's like this is the guy that's been wrong every important time. I remember when Trump was 2018 or something, when Trump had the Iran thing and he was like going to bomb Iran. And he was like, I asked them how many people were killed. And they were like, none, Mr. President. I thought, none. How many would we kill in this bombing run? And they said, 300. I said, none versus 300. It's a little unproportional. And Ben Shapiro flips out on Trump, and he's like, no, you want to be unproportional because the Vietnam War. And it's like, yeah, Ben.
Yeah, that's not a good example.
This is like, it's like, so, and I think one of the dividing lines would be, I want to decentralize power, right? Mm-hmm. So I talk to Republicans, and there's Republicans that are they're anxious to get it. Like, if it would be somebody who's like, yeah, we'll get in power and then we'll run these things, versus somebody that's like, I want to fundamentally, I want to abolish the FBI. Mm. I don't want to get in charge and then make it honest. It's never been honest. Correct. I know enough history.
There's a certain maybe decade, 15 years.
It really
after Nixon's and
it is always
Ford's choice to the judge under Reagan. I think that period is actually when it's doing the job everyone thinks it is. And after the guy before Louis Frey, but that's when it starts going back to the J. Edgar Hoover model.
So
back to nature.
The FBI has actually always been a prosecutorial secret police-like system in the United States since conception. Mm-hmm. The thing is, their targets have been more sympathetic in the past, because in the 50s they're going after communists. We don't really like communists. In the 60s, 70s, they're going after the Black Panthers, and not for racial reasons, for legitimate social, like they were actively trying to start a color revolution in the United States. They were actively trying to start a violent revolution. It was right for them to go after them, but don't make any mistake. They were going after them through very illegal means. In fact, the precursor of how they went around going after the Black Panthers is what caused set a lot of the precedent for the drug wars and the three strike rules that we saw to this day. Like, those were very aggressive, arguably constitutional, truly unconstitutional means of putting people in jail that they just wanted to get off of the bank, off the street, or off the radar of the government in power at the time. And the thing is, when there's no longer a Black Panther group anymore, then they start turning, like, they have to justify their existence. And now they've come to conservatives now, and it sucks because I probably, like you, Owen, grew up with, the FBIs are just, cops, national cops that are probably filled with good people trying to do the best they can.
They're the super cops.
Exactly. Yeah. They're probably good people trying to, look, they went after commies. Like, how bad can they be? But the fact of the matter is, just because they go after people we don't like doesn't mean that the organization itself was not wrong in its conception. What they did was wrong, but we just didn't mind it because it was against people we didn't like. And this is the problem with these sorts of organizations existing. It's cool until they do it to you.
Right.
And you have to suck up your pride and say, this needs to go. Not reform, it needs to go. And and you have to be that asshole that says, yeah, look, I hate that I'm siding with you when it negatively impacts me, but look, that's honestly how this went down. This FBI needs to go.
Yeah, and if you do need a national police force, as we were talking to me and Owen were talking to Rich on Sunday, where just go to the marshals, who were the original federal police force.
Yeah, in fact, there were
giving them all their powers back if you really need a cross-border police force.
And the marshals are way cooler.
Yeah.
So, look at that cool factor. I also, when the J. Edgar was basically, I mean, what he was doing was like he was creating this entrenched position for him, and he was creating the FBI was his baby, and it was his path to power. He was what he was actually doing was he was usurping the marshals, and the marshals didn't like it. The marshals didn't get it because they were like, "What are these guys doing here? Like, this is our job. Why are you here?" So J. Edgar was incredibly political. It's why for his whole life he completely denied the existence of the mafia. Why? Because he couldn't take them on. He couldn't beat them. So if you can't, then
and he used them as a stabilizing force as well.
Yeah, he also did do that. He did a lot of things. But I mean, I view him as an utterly Machiavellian character.
You know who reminds me a lot about him?
What?
Dr. Anthony Fauci basically did what took J. Edgar's model
with the CDC
and applied it to science.
We can. I mean, it's weird because in both scenarios we did give them the keys.
Yep.
And the thing is, but the difference is though the communists actually were trying to.
Yes.
It wasn't like
that's the rub.
To me, COVID is egos given power.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on in the 50s and the 60s? I mean, look, I can look back retrospectively and say what they did to the communists was the way they went about it was wrong, but it did need to happen. It did need to happen because if it was not checked, they would have eventually gotten around to more violent revolutionary steps that would have caused massive instability in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, again, some bad policy came out of it. You know, the gun bans in the cities was aimed directly at Black Panthers.
Yes,
they were trying to get guns out of their hands because cities like Philadelphia and Chicago were exceptionally violent in the 70s and the 80s to where when we study U.S. history in school, there's sort of this gap in the 70s and 80s that we just don't talk about because it was so terribly violent. And
it would not look good for the politics of the teachers if they were to talk about it.
It doesn't look good for anybody. And when you start looking into,
you just get to watch it through freaking Dirty Harry movies.
Oh,
right.
Well, that's how I met Jacqueline. The first time was I was doing movie streams for COVID. There was a lockdown. Like I can go out and anything. So I was hosting movie streams. Barnes would actually pin them to the top of the Viva Barnes locals.
Oh, okay.
And I would host. At first, I looked into the laws on it, get it in the free and clear. So to make sure I could do it, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, legally. And so I would stream it, and the Dirty Harry movie was the first time she hopped on the Zoom meeting that I just put open for the whole board. So that was the first time I saw it.
No, yeah, the media is very.
I was curious,
and no, the way that these groups go about usurping the entire system is going through the low income, underserviced group. Basically, the government's coming in and promising. And I'm almost at an impasse of, do these government programs exist to not allow communist groups to allow them to usurp? Because a lot of the way the Black Panthers and other groups like them would try to get their foothold in these cities is offer school lunch programs, maternity programs for kids. And it was just an avenue to feed kids communist propaganda. But whenever they would be asking, what are you up to? Oh, we're just trying to feed the hungry. We're just trying to, it was a form of proselytization that they would try to go into these low income communities and then just feed them all this communist propaganda. But that was the foot in the door, and the government wouldn't be, providing nearly as much as they would be today. But that was their avenue in. And I sometimes question if that's one of the means that the current state justifies providing what it provides in food stamps and stuff like that. So at the very least, they're slaves to the state and not potentially open to, these sorts of uprisings or, dependencies on other powers other than the government.
That's an interesting idea that it was brought about in order to fight communism. I don't agree with that proposal.
I think it was designed to beat the little platoons.
I'm 50-50 on it. I could see It's make the people dependent on government, so they're not.
Well, I think that is why they were made. I think it was made to make the people dependent on government.
Right.
I don't know that they were really concerned with fighting communism.
Mhm.
I think that it was, a crisis in Leviathan, that book situation.
Mhm.
I think it was a great. I mean, the guy who ushered that through was the LBJ. You know what I mean? He's one of like my top 3 worst presidents.
Right.
Um,
So let me guess. Worst, Wilson?
I would, if I had a time machine, I wouldn't kill Hitler. I'd kill Woodrow Wilson.
Yep. Then FDR, then LBJ?
Yeah, FDR and LBJ I view as equally. No, LBJ is more repugnant because of the
like just his personal.
because of Jumbo and that whole stuff.
Yeah.
And then FDR, I also find him politically.
As I call him, president for life.
I know, it's ridiculous. I have such little, and he's so lionized, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I read Amity Chalet's The Forgotten Man, and I do not have any respect for FDR after what he did. Well, some respect for what he did, but like, no, you really did destroy the country.
Yeah, he gets such a pass now because of the Second World War.
Mhm.
I think if it weren't for that, he would not be remembered the same. So because of the Second World War, he's then given the credit for the Depression.
Yeah.
It all gets wrapped up in this great leader. And it's interesting. Stephen Kotkin has I don't think the third part's out yet, but he's written the first 2 parts in a biography of Stalin. They're incredible. You got to check it out.
Okay.
I don't go to him for political takes in the modern world.
Yeah, his once the war started, even looking back at some of his comments before the Russian war, I'm like, you really think Putin's going to poison all of Kiev? You really think that's possible? But I did read one of his other books that is on the fall of the Soviet Union, which is very interesting. He has this description of how he meets up with the country's fallen. He's bringing Gorbachev and his top lieutenant to New York just to show them around because, they're out of power. And he takes them down to the Chinese food district. And, there's restaurant after restaurant of various Asian foods going on for mile after mile. We have the same thing in Toronto. And Gorbachev just turns to him like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
You must show me where the bureaucracies are to handle all these restaurants. Because in his mind, anything like that had to be like, you had to have like 10,000 people running each restaurant.
Centrally planned.
Yeah, it all had to be centrally planned. And he's like, where are the bureaucrats who are manning all these restaurants to make this possible?
Yeah.
And
it's
tell you there are no bureaucrats.
It's an escalation of how government systems can come about. Because in Russia, if there was no government, there'd be a mob. And in a weird way, they're almost interchangeable in places like Russia. And this is kind of goes to why the Second Amendment in the Wild West is so important in the U.S. is if there is a mob that does come up, you've got some, you can take care of it where you can take the law into your own hands where there is none. And that's something that's just very valuable and unique to the United States is when somebody does want to try and become their own, government, you can grab some of your people and go deal with it. And if no one's around to see it, did it even happen?
Right.
Well, ultimately, the government only exists because of the people, right? Of the people, for the people, by the people. So it is all power really ultimately rests with the people. So policing belongs to the people, and they have a right to defend themselves and to stop crimes. And that's what you actually want. It is preferable to have a citizenry that is self-enforcing of its rules and its laws, not like in a COVIDian sense. Put your mask on, not like that. Like where there are brave men that will intervene in a crime to stop a woman from being assaulted, to stop a guy who snatched her purse, to stop a rape, to stop a potential murder, to stand up. You want that. That's actually really healthy. When you get to a point which is where a lot of parts in America are, Jordan Peterson talks about one of the worst things that in history, when he reads stuff that really destroys people, punish someone for their virtues, right? that'll destroy people. So that's what like the DAs, the Soros DAs are doing, going after the Kyle Rittenhouses, going after that Marine in New York who choked somebody out and died.
Mm-hmm.
You're punishing men for their virtues, and you're punishing people for their virtues. So, don't reach out, don't help, whatever you do, because the consequences for you and thus your family and your life are dire if you reach out to help your fellow countrymen. I find that stuff really terrible. And it's the death of that spirit of that American spirit. And I also find that's a result of the change in relationship between government and citizen or subject, because that's what you are. You're either you're wearing the crown or you're serving someone who does. So our founders talked about, they say, who wears the crown? Who's the sovereign? The people are sovereign. Not to sound like one of those sovereign citizens, those guys who talk about, there's a gold fringe on that flag. That makes this a court of admiralty. I declare my car a ship, and by the laws of the sea, I can't decline as a captain.
Well, but the thing is, it's
not to sound like that.
It's so weird because the truth is, the world that was in 1783, was it? And the world now is just for the government is just two completely different sets of circumstances. Because it's easy to say citizens should be the crown when you do not have the money or really the economy to have a Britain-sized enforcement structure. Even if they wanted to go that route, the money in the infrastructure was never there to enforce that. And America was just too big and had too many problems to even have that kind of infrastructure. And truth be told, it is too big to even enforce to this day, but they seem to think they can try. And it's like the power does come from the citizenry, but the necessity and the scale is also judged by the public's problems. It's the difference between, do your officers carry batons, sidearms, rifles, or are they rolling up in a freaking armored tank? Just because the government gives you sovereignty, the spectrum of how hard do they carry their stuff does go on a need by need basis. And it's really dangerous when your elected officials perceive that they need a lot indefinitely.
Yeah. I mean, I remember another part of Maryland is the fact that other part that's not Baltimore, everything below that, I call that North DC, the northern suburb of DC. And the same thing with like Tyson's Corner down to Virginia. They even have a thing, it's called DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, a region, right? So I've been in DC a lot, having lived within it's like an hour drive. It's not that far. Would take field trips there and stuff. Man, after the 2020 election, I had never. It was if you just had were going through when you were doing taking B shots for like a movie, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is like a military junta. That's what it looked like. Yeah, and seeing it in person, the fences and stuff, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm. And part of me was like, this is nice. It's kind of a face-off thing, a mask-off kind of thing, where it's like, oh, yeah, there's the face underneath, where it's like, this is what they're like.
Yeah. No, for me, when I remember watching the riot, and at the time thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. And then the Democrats made the biggest mistake, as far as I was concerned, was to go for a second impeachment. I'm like, oh, you're okay, good. Go make this terrible thing you're going to do. Now you're going to just rally all these Republicans right back to Trump immediately. The best thing they could have done was try to sweep it under the rug and pretend it and make it kind of go away and try to return to normalcy. And just when any Republican came up or Trump came up and you said, what, you're going to give us another riot, and just kind of use it as how the Unionists used to use the bloody shirt reference. But no, they had to try and exploit it to their advantage. And they just drove everyone back right into Trump land. And now they're going to see what happens. We'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. It's the Chinese have cursed us, man. These dang They living in interesting times for sure. It is, yeah. But to Paul's earlier, you were saying like, oh, they couldn't have had that system. The thing is, they didn't want that system, and
Right.
the other thing is about it is the people would not have stood for it and had every ability to stop them, right? So it's tough because it's part of the problem is that those government programs and just the amount of money that the percentage of our economy in our GDP now that is via government, not just like Social Security or that kind of the entitlements program stuff. I'm talking about like what they spend in like the military, what they throw in schools, and all this other stuff that's coming out from the government is huge, and it's tough. What part of what that does, those programs, you can't say no to the person feeding you. You have to be able to tell the government to go screw themselves, and if you can't do that, it changes the nature of the relationship between people and their government. The nature, and so I agree with you that what part of our problem is we're in this flux state right now, where it's somewhere between like 180s BC Rome, where it's like the Republic is very clearly doing very empirical things, but you have all the vestiges still of the and people are going about and electing people and still doing these things, but it's the nature of the Republic had changed. So either we're going to do things to reestablish some kind of a control for citizenry, because the other thing that's going away is citizenry. Just the idea of citizenry has been utterly under assault for decades.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole thing of, illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, refugees. No person is illegal. That's been the slow march, right? So now they cross the border and they're American. Congratulations, you're an American. You crossed a border. Here's $300,000. Please take your free house. Get out of the way. What is that? A homeless vet? Get him out of here. It's like that. It's a total power imbalance. There's no. I mean, you saw how they freaked out. There was genuine. I think they wanted January 6th to happen because they planned it. But I think that it did scare them because that's what they're afraid of. That's why they don't want people to have guns, because that's a dividing line. It's why they continually go after them, because they know if they pushed and did the things they really wanted to do, the things they feel they're just necessary. It's the necessary thing, right? In Obama's words, to utterly transform America, which is what he said his goal is. That's his business, what he wants to get done. Those pesky people with their guns, they just want to cause a problem. Because the Soviets,
the thing is, every time they want to reshape America, what guns do is they ask a question, which is your idea worth dying over? And 99% of the time, the answer is no. That's how you know it's not a good idea, because the stuff worth fighting for is worth dying over, and that's the thing. These pet projects are not worth dying over. They're not worth killing over, and that's your natural conclusion when you have a armed citizenry. And it's interesting because one thing that has really been on my mind the last week has been the appearance of how political machines are built in major cities and how they are set up in such a manner with taxpayer dollars to constantly fund the rehiring of these politicians through jobs, placements, and grants. And how do they use their taxpayer dollars to pay off or to pay their own support? I think Sheila Jackson Lee in Houston is an excellent case study of how political machines are built. She's deeply unpopular, yet she never loses a re-election. And she does manage through exchange of taxpayer dollars for votes an ability to create a base of support. And I was curious. I was wondering, how does one fight that? Because you cannot overtly do it. Because how do you, like you said, how do you say no to the person who's feeding you? And the answer is you take away the food that they're feeding them, because these city bureaucracies do not create value. They take money from people like me and who are paying an exorbitant amount of taxes, and they give it to them and say, they say that they're giving to them when in really through me, they're giving it. And you have to look at a place like New York and see what's changing. Why are all these counties all of a sudden voting Republican or becoming more Republican, like voting less Democrat now? And COVID is a big answer to this, not because it happened, but because it prompted so many people to leave. Because once your pork leaves the state, those people don't have a reason to vote for you anymore, because your projects are done. The funding is now, it's not cut. It no longer exists. Because cut is a power move. When you do not have funding, the ability to pork the population through bureaucracy goes away. And now where do you go when your taxpayers leave? And I think in the last 20 years, mobility has played such a big role, and people are becoming self-aware of how mobile they can be. And this is where working from home plays such an advantage with these cities, because I don't have to subject myself to liberal leaders anymore who want to have all these pet projects in the city. I can go, and I think Austin is also a good example. A lot of people don't live in Austin, and they live in West Austin, outside of Austin city limits, outside of the county, where they could be free from the taxes, free from the leadership, but also be in the community of like-minded people. I think New York potentially might be running into this issue where a lot of their tax base has left the city, and now there's less and less people to pull money from. And even if the budget hasn't changed that much, there's the people, if you reduce the taxpayers, like let's say 80% of your tax budget from 1,000 individuals to 500 individuals, but you tax them the same, well, those 500 individuals now have a lot more sway in the public conversation, because if they want to move now, because the difference between 500 and 1,000 is, well, now you're 1 in 1,000. Well, once you become 1 in 500, 1 in 300, 1 in 200, your ability to have sway in the you mean a lot more when you're one of the last people left, and you have a lot more sway, because if you leave, now my machine doesn't have any bullets. My machine doesn't have any sway. And what I mean by machine is the public works person. I can't take somebody here and put them in this leadership position. I can't award contracts to this union for exorbitant cost anymore, because I don't have the money to give them anymore. I'm out of cash. And we're already underwater in our budget due to levies and loans. So I can't, sell off my debt to investors anymore. So my only means of funding my operation is through taxes. And now that my tax base, my productive tax base, meaning people who give more than they take, has been reduced, the people who stayed have more sway over those policies, and they actually have walkaway. The walkaway power actually means something now, where they can actually have some sway in saying, like, look, if you want this massive $100 million tax bill that I'm going to cut for you, you're going to have to work with me a little bit. Otherwise, I'm selling to this Chinese investor here for pennies. And we'll see how that appraisal looks when they mismanage this thing. Oh, also, they may or may not keep it because they don't live here. They don't care if this building goes down. I might, because I live here. But you know what? I can go move over there in that part of the state, or I can move to a completely different state and I'll be fine too. We're not as region locked with business anymore in this day and age where we were only 50 years ago. And that, I think, is playing into the dynamics of a lot of the current change that we're seeing in places like the Northeast and even certain parts of California, with on the city level with San Francisco and LA, where you're actually having these DAs who are loose on crime now starting to turn the other cheek because the people are actually pissed. The people who stick around are being sucked for the political machine to function. So at least that's what I'm seeing from the finances side. And that's how you could see yourself as an individual. Do you participate in the political machine or not? Can you identify that there's a political machine in an area? Like Baltimore very much has a political machine. Where there is gerrymandering, there is a political machine.
Mm-hmm.
And political machine is taxpayer dollars paying for votes in the form of contractors, positions in government, etc. So that's something that I've tried to been identifying, and how do we interact with that as citizens, specifically ones who are the higher end taxpayers.
Yeah, I find what you're talking about, where people are more powerful in those areas where they're leaving. You're talking about like areas like Detroit, right? That kind of thing.
Well, in Detroit, New York. I feel like you're actually seeing it in New York because New York lost a lot of its conservative base, yet somehow they're voting more conservative. And what Rich tells us in the book club is it's not that you might think that the liberals are leaving, but no, conversion is happening. People are actually converting. And
it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if you guys were paying attention to the Brexit vote and then the conservative majority that unfortunately they squandered over in England. That election, that Boris Johnson, that majority, and how they ripped through what was called the red wall of labor.
Yep.
And I'm watching people in labor things, and they suddenly did the whole group think that, the social pressure was out there to not vote labor. Like all these union guys and all these guys went out and just sort of started saying to you, yeah, this election we're voting Tory because we're getting rid of these people.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to, honestly, the biggest push would be in blue collar to make the blue collar push. And these people, they are natural. They would not like Democrats by their nature, by the attitudes of Democrats and stuff, what they represent now.
Culturally.
A blue collar person, you don't like the managerial professional class. Mm-hmm. You don't like the people that go to college that look down on you because you do. I am engaged currently to an engineer who went to college and I guess is technically in the professional class, but
love hate.
One of the good ones. And I think that would be a great put. I mean, go to union halls. Like union halls, those guys would love Trump, or the Trumpism, that movement, and the attitude around it. A lot of it, really, they don't like the attitude of. I've personal experience with this. They just don't. And in any construction site, go to a construction site, guaranteed that is a red construction site.
Right. Here in Canada, those people are all voting Tory. They all vote already. We already had this kind of conversion already happen a while back. So
yeah, and so with
if it's non-public sector union, they're usually vote. And we even had these people back 40 years ago. It was just a weird era where we lost them for a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment. But as the problem is that top down at the top of the unions, those guys are all professional class. And they're all Democrats, and they control the unions, and that's their source of power and prestige, and so they put the pressure on their people to either not speak up against the Democrats or not speak up for MAGA, for America First, that wing of the party, which would be the wing that is the home of where those guys would find a home. And the other problem is that the Rhino wing of the Republican Party, the establishment wing, is utterly detestable to these guys and to me. And so it's a real PR problem when you have Nikki Haley going around talking about we need to raise the wage or raise the age of retirement and pushing pushing all these other different detestable neocon talking points. Like it's 2000, and no, not even like it's 2000, because honestly, Bush didn't run as he actually did later.
Yeah, you're thinking more 2004 or
more 2004
or 2012.
Yeah, with the full neocon points. That is going to completely turn these people off. So they're going to think this is the face of the Republican Party, except for Trump. So it's what they're doing is, just as the Tories have squandered their capital and that potential to have a total shift in their constituency and the population there. This is happening again with these idiot establishment Republicans that are doing anything because they know that means if the voters of the Republican Party make up changes, it means they're finally done. It's over. Their time holding the reins of power. There'll probably still be some people there definitely will still be rhinos in the party, but they won't be directing things anymore. They won't be controlling the RNC. They won't be getting all that sweet money that from their grift and their graft.
In Canada, we went through actually this fight in the 90s, so we're kind of ahead of Britain and United States. So so it's very bizarre to me when 2016 happened and Trump became the Republican nominee, and I'm like looking at this. Oh wait, I get it. You're happy to take the populists and the MAGA types of money and their votes and their volunteer, but you're not even willing to give them a seat at the table or, God forbid, drive the car for a while. And meanwhile, in Canada, the fight happened, and now sometimes the populists, MAGA, what we would consider MAGA, are running the Conservative Party. Certainly, they're running it this time. And and sometimes you get the red Tory gets to be in charge for a while. We understand we have to share, but these rhinos don't think they have to.
Right. Well, they're very entitled, and and personally, I think part of the issue is this United States identity that it doesn't exist. This country is different in many different ways. You will not find a politician, let alone a group, that you can find in all 50 states, conservative or Democrat, or liberal. We're all like a progressive in California is not the same as a progressive in Texas. It's not the same as a progressive in Maine. It's not the same as a progressive in Florida. Those are four completely different type of people. And to make such an arrogant statement that there is somebody like that is straight wrong. It's just wrong. And I tend to agree. The Republican Party believes in its own delusion that it represents everyone. It doesn't, not by a long shot. But these past elections in the last week, I should say, it feels like weeks have gone by. Last week tell us is Trumpism is popular, Republicanism is not. And they're trying to conflate it wherever they can. Oh, these Republicans lost. It's a rejection of Trump. Oh, these Republicans won. They're ready to offload Trump. And I think Vivek at the last debate nailed it. It is not a Trump problem. It's a Republican Party problem. And that's why they need to get rid of the head of the RNC. I mean, it's disgraceful that the head of the RNC and the former speaker McCartney were both, their value was seen not in their rhetoric or their ability to properly portray the views of conservatives, but their ability to raise money. And I even see that on the Texas politics level. Your viability as a candidate for a lot of these scouts is your ability to raise money, not popularity. There is a serious line of thinking in the Republican Party that thinks popularity can be bought.
Right.
You even see it on the Democrat side. I mean, I think that who's the billionaire that hopped in the race in 2016?
Yeah. Oh my God. They murdered him.
What's that?
Bloomberg.
Yeah, Bloomberg bought into this because the political consultant class genuinely believes popularity can be bought. It can't. Not the kind of popularity that gets people to knock on doors, give time, and show up on election day. That's not the same thing. And the thing is, Ronna McDaniel is head of the RNC because she could raise money. McCartney was chosen as speaker for his ability to raise money. It does not make any sense for a Republican in California to be the head politician for the Republican Party. But he is for some reason. Why? Because he raises money better than anybody else can. Same with Ronna McDaniel. And this is the problem with the Republican Party in general. There's way too much emphasis on raising money than it is to be a genuinely popular figurehead that represents the views of at least a plurality of its members.
I think that, this idea of raising money, I think what that really means is who is most favored by the lobbyists and the lobbying groups and the powers that be, right? So really what it means is those people are probably the most establishment. They're the ones that should be the least. They will always be the ones that are probably least represent their people. That's one of my issues I had with Laura Loomer criticizing Matt Gaetz for putting out hey, when he was out there, hey, look, donate to me. When he was ousting Kevin McCarthy, she was like, he's using this as an opportunity just to get money for his following elections and stuff. So I'm like, well, I'll tell you where he's not going to be getting any money after this for sure is any GOP, RNC, any of these groups. They're going to actually be actively trying to primary him. He better be doing this because he's going to have to defend himself. And I actually did donate to him. I donated $50. And I guarantee you those are his donations. Those are the things. And he probably does in Florida where he kind of has a seat. One, he's popular amongst his voters. And two, I'm sure there probably are business people there that have businesses that will donate to him. But it's not the same thing as the Kevin McCarthys and the Ron McDaniels taking the money from the big corporations and lobbyist groups that are helping to fund their campaign and give them the money, right?
Well, it's criminal because they take the money and then they don't spend it. They only spend it on candidates that they like. That's why we keep losing is they take all that money and then don't give it to Republican candidates that genuinely and sincerely win a primary because of their views.
Right.
It's so incestuous because not only do they then do that, or they'll actively primary go put people in a primary and stuff in order to knock out a promising grassroots populist type candidate because it is, again, that is them holding onto the reins of power because those people rising up would be to upset their apple cart. They want to keep the status quo where they're in charge, not getting stuff done. And because the truth is they don't agree with their base. They haven't since the 90s. I mean, I think Newt Gingrich did, but they ousted him. They got rid of him.
Yeah.
And I also think that whole Republican revolution from the 90s, one, I actually think it was great. Other than, I don't know, now looking back with the fullness of time, enough time has passed to say the centralization of power on the speakership that Gingrich ushered in may not have been the best thing.
Yeah.
But
it'd be one thing if, I don't think it wouldn't have been a bad thing if Congress didn't just proactively give all of its power to the presidency.
Yeah.
I don't mind Congress consolidating its power, but when
not Congress,
I specifically talked to the House. I don't mind the House of Representatives consolidating its power to become more organized and direct. But the thing is, they've made themselves virtually irrelevant when they give some of the biggest issues, such as war powers, to the president.
Right.
You got 90 days to do whatever.
Before we get into that a little bit, I just want to say, if you can find it, there's a great back when A&E used to be called Arts and Entertainment, and they actually were making good products instead of being the space alien show. There was a series of video or shows, basically like a Dateline type thing, and it's about the Newt Gingrich taking over Congress. and it's great to just watch it and seeing all these guys like John Boehner when he's brand new trying to argue for like term limits and all this stuff that's happening. But what was really wonderful was to see that the reporter or the host of the show is agreeing with the Republicans.
Wow, that's novel.
It's like you're seeing a general media guy like, oh yeah, is actually a conservative, happy to see conservatives actually in power. It's a lot of fun.
And I need to step to the side for a second, but we're coming up on an hour and a half here. Owen, this is one question we like to ask sort of in the last 10 minutes is what should we be talking about right now from your perspective? I'm going to step aside real quick. Go ahead and start.
Yeah. Do you mean like what should we like as a nation be talking about, or like
what do you think we should be talking about?
Do you mean us in the podcast here, or are you talking about
a podcast or the conservative movement, whatever way you think it is best? What's the one thing people should be talking about? Like we kind of ripped this off from trigonometry, I guess, but it's like, what do you think we should be talking about that no one else is talking about?
I think that people need to really talk about how to decentralize more than they realize they need to. So we need to decentralize education, but that doesn't just mean decentralizing like by abolishing the Department of Education. It's a good start, right? With the old joke about lawyers in a bus, oh, what do you call a bus full of lawyers that fell off a cliff? What a good start. Right. Well, I think there needs to be I think the best thing would be a massive homeschool revolution where people homeschooled their kids in homeschool co-ops. You would get better educated kids, actually. And I mean that so we get the Fed out of it, but then what we do is to somehow empower people to do that. I think that there's been a great centralization. I think another problem that people need to talk about is a revitalization of America's entrepreneurial spirit. Most people are employees, so this is a part of it, right? So there's not a real talking about we're so under assault that we can't look far enough into the future to do these things that I think are really important. And have those conversations, but that people need to do that because it would be really good if there were a bunch of small businesses, mid to small business size, I think is really great, So
do you feel the entrepreneurship question is probably one of the more understated issues in the conservative Overton window?
No, I think it's broader. I think it's part of people need to talk about how to empower regular people and put more money and power into regular people's hands and decentralize it. The left talks about it, but when they talk about it, they're talking about taking it from people. What that really means is concentrating it in the hands of the state. And sometimes I do believe in anti-monopoly laws, and I think that they should be exercised against. It's overdue in food. The other thing that we need to do is decentralize food. Food has been centralized. We've completely centralized food and now people are getting this. That's why people are getting charged so much for meat, and it's less healthy. It's not good for you. And one of the really nice things here in Oklahoma, we buy from we went to farmers markets and stuff and found people that raise chickens and pigs and cows or steers. And our fridge is chock full of bacon and pork and ribs and other stuff from those different groups. And that's how it should be. It'd be better because people will get healthier food. America is incredibly unhealthy, but that's all part of everything getting centralized. You go into Walmart and they have grocery stores. And around here, if you go to a grocery store, it's probably Walmart. If you're not getting yourself from a farmer's market. I wish that on the right, that was more of a thing. A lot of farmers markets, the providers are probably on the right, and then the buyers seem to be the left.
Right.
The right is slowly woken up to this. It's a recent discovery I've found. That's a topic that they don't talk about. But broadly, like there's a whole focus on like we get in power and then the things we do with it. I want a discussion on, I find that the Republic is in dire straits because of a centralization of power and wealth and property. And these are, when things are left to their own devices, they tend to just, like a snowball down a hill, just continually roll along. It's as the slow things of history. Things don't generally reverse course on their own. The natural state of the world is entropy. Man has to intervene to stop that. And if we don't do some things here to change people's relationship, what will happen is we will get socialism. We already have a lot of it, but it'll get way worse. We're going to get, and the other thing is it'll find its justification in that concentration. So it'll find its ability in the concentration of power that we continually accrue into the government. And then it'll find its justification into the concentration of wealth, because people can't get money. People can't find success. And then those that spirit, everything will devolve into is to power, which is where it's headed. We're kind of right there a little bit. But so if we want to stop that, there has to be a real discussions on, I think that the word would probably be radical. Like, we need to radically re-examine the decisions we've been making from the 20th century onward that have changed our society, that have led us to a point where our republic is basically like we're on the edge of looking like the Destruction of Empire painting by Thomas Cole. To me, America is the republic in the same way. Like, I'm not so interested in Rome. Like, a couple emperors in, I'm like, I'm done with you. I'm like dropping Woody. I'm like, what I love is Republican Rome, and that's Rome to me. Same way America is like the republic. If we're just fully transformed into an empire and stuff, it's like, I'm not gonna be like I'm not, the flag doesn't represent what it represented then. So and we need to so that's like long-term stuff, and nobody's talking about that. Well, some people are talking about it, but nobody's talking about doing things like, destroying the public education system, which is like, that's where I'm at. Just destroy it. Like, I know that's not reasonable, right? You say, we'll replace it. I feel like you have to begin the process to create the alternative for it.
It is very possible, and that's sort of what I was getting at, is you walk away, and that's what a lot of people do, because the one common factor you'll find with every single underperforming public education system is they're very top heavy with administrators. If, as a tax base, if you walk away, they can't afford it. It will implode due to a lack of taxpayer base. And that's ultimate. And what's wild and just terrible is they will sell schools. They will cut teachers' salaries before they let go of any administrators.
Yeah.
That's what just breaks my heart, and just takes away any sort of, like, what's the word, mercy towards these people. Is they will put the public through the ringer and the public workers through the ringer before they fire administrators. And because those administrators are the votes they're buying. That's the political appointments they put in. Because if they get rid of those people, then they lose votes. And it's just, it's a nasty back and forth. And that's one of the things that, I take what you're saying and I reflect on that. It's how do you stop the centralization of power? Well, you don't enable it. Well, you might think that means voting, but really it means paying taxes. Well, how I have to pay taxes? Yes, you do, but you get to pick where you pay your taxes.
Right.
And that's one of the most powerful things you could do. And sometimes if you really don't, like, I don't like the city of Houston or HISD, so I don't live in its city limits. So, that's how but I like my city, Katy, and I have no problem paying their higher property taxes. In fact, they're probably the reason why the property values go up here, because they do such a good job. That's, people want to be here because of it. That's what I'm saying. Your best. You have 2 votes, one in the ballot box and then one in your taxpayer dollars. And if you're a productive citizen, your taxpayer vote goes up in value.
Starship Trooper says there's another box that you vote with, the ammo box.
I wish I could hold that sentiment, but people in this country,
I know it's just funny.
People in this country don't have it in them to pull the trigger. Like,
I don't know about that. Everyone thinks that until it starts happening, and then you find a lot of people are willing to pull the trigger. That's what history shows.
Yeah,
but I also would hope it doesn't happen because that's often
terrible. It's terrible.
Terrible situation.
It's terrible. The Civil War is that was one of the worst. People couldn't believe it when it started. People were like, "Are we really going to do this in America?" Like they were like, we're going to do this. That we're supposed to be, this is, like less than 100 years, and it's like we're going to do this here in America. We're going to go worth it. I can't. It's unbelievable. And then once it starts, man, it gets hot and heavy pretty quick.
Yeah.
You don't want. I don't want it to happen.
Yeah. People talk about all kinds of crazy things, but I just remember how World War II starts. British bombers are dropping leaflets over German cities. 1945, British bombers are killing 100,000 people in a night. You start off with the best of intentions, and war needs must, and you just go for things that you would never have thought were possible. Luckily for everyone in the world, the British didn't do the worst thing they came up with, which was they developed a weapon delivery system for botulism, and it would, according to all estimates, they would have depopulated Germany within a month. However, Germany would have been uninhabitable for a couple hundred years. Yeah.
I had never actually heard about that one.
I read it in an article. It's not well known.
That was a first for me too. I was like,
when I read that, I'm like, holy crap. And there is an island off the coast of Britain where they have a standing naval patrol, and its orders are to shoot any animal or bird that tries to leave the island because of the experiments they did in the World War II.
Interesting. Well, now we know why they're not worried about the Russia expansion.
Yeah,
I was wondering. Wow, they're really tame about this about the fear of expansion. I'm like, oh, okay, they got a WMD. That
everyone's got a WMD, but it was just like I read that, and it's like they're like, you know what, the Americans have entered the war on our side now. Maybe we don't really need to do this. We'll just go with firebombing.
Yeah, that's Well, that's a good way to.
Yeah, that's a good way to end. Well, I want to thank Owen
for that, David. Oh my God.
Yeah, something to chew on.
Yep.
I'm afraid of botulism. I wash all my dishes with soap because I don't want to end up like.
Yep.
Right. Well, we appreciate your time, Owen. Thank you for doing our first Ricochet episode, and we'll see everyone next week. Thanks for everyone who tuned in for that.
I don't know if we'll be here next week because I believe you two have a holiday.
Nope.
Okay. I thought your Thanksgiving was next week.
Is it?
It's November 23rd.
Oh shoot, that snuck up on me.
Yeah, it snuck up on you like this Grey Cup snuck up on me. So there you go. I might come on and do like a 50-minute rant, but the rest of you enjoy your turkey day.
Absolutely, and thank you everyone who stayed with us for the last 90 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.